What's the biggest secret you've kept quiet that could have ruined lives? I used to work at a major university and a couple of my bosses took from federal grant money and used it to pay for a vacation to Rio de Janeiro. One of my good friend's wife is in love with me. They have been married and have 3 kids. And she has told me that she is willing to leave all of that to be with me. If that info got out, I know at least 4 people whose lives would be turned upside down. Doesn't make it better that I'm a chick and I'm 15 years younger than she is. Teaching high school. A solid C student who is a good kid with not quite enough sense comes up to me after class. Mr. Deradius, I was fishing this morning and forgot I had this in my pocket. Wanted to do the right thing. Goes to hand me a pocket knife. The district has a zero tolerance policy. It's unclear what will happen to this kid. Depends on whether it has happened before. But it will be some pretty bad mojo. The last thing I want is for this kid to learn firsthand at this point in his life that doing the right thing will get you fed into the wheels of a terrible bureaucracy where you will then be ground into dust. So I tell him about the policy and what would happen to him if I weren't me. Then I put the knife in my own pocket, wondering to myself if I'll get fired if I'm caught with it, and give it back to him at the end of the day, with a statement along the lines of, "I never saw this. You're going to go straight home and never bring this back to school. And we're never going to speak of this again." Very, very rarely do I break or bend any rules or laws. I drive 5 miles under the speed limit. I felt guilty even doing this. But in this case, I could not in good conscience turn this kid in for doing what he was supposed to do. My grandmother always told us her dad was a firefighter who had a heart attack at age 35 and died, and her mom had told her a whole story down to the exact street corner he had the attack on, and I never thought about it. Except it did seem a little strange that no one else in our family had any history of heart disease, much less an early death from it. When she was dying of cancer, her last wish was to be buried next to him, but she didn't know where he was buried, so I told her I would try and help. I did a bunch of research and found out that he actually didn't die of a heart attack, but instead just left my great grandma, moved to LA, remarried and had a new family. He died there some 30 years after my grandma thought he did. I never told my grandma that her dad abandoned her. Her last memories of him were good ones and she ended up in an orphanage after that, so he really did duck her life over. I'm curious to meet his new family, but I don't think they'd be interested to know he never divorced my great grandma, so his marriage to their mom was never actually valid. Well, I bought my current house from this guy, and now he lives in a bunker underneath the property. The bastard doesn't think I know, but I see him every time he comes and goes in the night. I posted this in an AskReddit thread before, but it fits the criteria, so I put it here as well. A new girl came to our school from England and her reason for coming was just for studies. She was smart and she was taking 3 AP classes, so it seemed legit. Well, a few months later, I heard my cousin talking about a news report she watched about a thing that was happening to girls in England. The girls were tricked by men, and at the end of it, they would be drugged and then raped. The men would take pictures of her and threaten to show her parents unless she prostituted herself. My cousin said that the girl they interviewed had to live near us as there were some landmarks in the video of our city. I later checked the video and it had confirmed that the new girl at school was her. She came to America to get away from her town where everyone knew what happened to her. I'm the only one at our school that knows. I secretly hide the Ben & Jerry's in the downstairs freezer. My family never gets a taste of the good stuff. Throwaway here. One of my best mates, let's call him Charles, deals meth. He doesn't deal in big portions but still enough to destroy people's lives. What I didn't know was that my sister was going through a rough patch and started to buy off him. Charles knew this, however. Due to his family background, he wasn't financially stable and he would often crash at his mates' houses regularly, ergo he kept supplying my sister for the easy cash. I was unaware that any of this was going on at the time. And not only was it ruining my sister's life but also the lives of the other people he was supplying. We first found out about my sister's drug abuse when our parents were going through her room for dirty laundry and found her stash under her bed. We questioned her about it and she insisted that she was only holding it for her friend Jamie to stop her from using. We didn't believe her, so we locked her up in the basement and took the meth to smoke for ourselves because we know that the meth Charles deals is some quality it. When I was younger, I had a lot of problems going on in my life. I couldn't focus on school because I partied and smoked weed a lot. My brother tried to help me, but he couldn't. I found out that one of my brother's friends, named Charles, sold meth for easy money, so I bought some of it and started smoking. My brother quickly found out about it. He stole my meth and locked me in my parents' basement while he smoked it himself. My buddy, very popular guy, tried to make a move on me on his birthday. We're both guys and really good friends. So as of now I think he's closeted or IDK honestly. I've never brought it up. Only to one friend. Never planning on telling anyone. I'm still cool with him and I'm sure he remembers. But that's his business. When I was 10 a family friend molested me until I was 13. I was young and terrified and never told anybody because I knew what it would go down if I did. My mother would have lost it. My brother would have tried to kill the man. And I knew that everyone would want to take him to court. I just wanted it to go away, and a few weeks after I turned 13, he died in a car crash. So, he got what was coming to him. I still haven't told anybody except one person. I was, and still am, afraid to tell my family. Edit. I want to thank all of you. Thank you for all of your kind comments. No one admit to a murder this time, please. I found out my father isn't my biological father. My real father died a few years back and I never got to meet him while he was alive. Apparently my mother was in love with him, and once my parents split for a brief period in the early 80s I was conceived. Once I was born my mother left him and continued with my father. Nobody knows I know. And I actually found his kids and family on FB. I haven't spoken of this to them or sent a friend request. Occasionally when I'm feeling down I go view their profiles and see how their lives are going. So I have 2 younger half siblings I've never met. I doubt they know I exist. I'm scared of telling my folks I know in fear of reigniting a fires that have burned out or hurting our relationship deeply. It's crazy the outpouring of support and people sharing similar stories. It makes me feel not so alone. This girl I knew was a bit crazy, murdered someone by smashing some guy's head in with a brick. Now, the person was trying to abuse her, so I am 100% okay with what she did, but even if she got out of it for self-defense, the police would probably find a lot more to her after the investigation. My grandpa took the job in Saudi Arabia to be closer to his Filipino girlfriend, leaving his brain-damaged wife to suffer her final years in my and my mother's care. My grandma is doing everything she can to get well after her stroke, hoping he comes back home. It's heartbreaking. I secretly enjoy when people reuse AskReddit threads. Sometimes they give people who weren't around last time to contribute. I knew my friend's uncle was cheating on his wife. Also he was getting his 14-year-old to drive him around when he was drunk. Edit. Missed some words. My half-sister molested me until I was 9. She's now married with 2 kids. And I haven't spoken to her in 7 years. And don't intend to. It's not her life I care about. I'd leave her rotting in a ditch if I could. I just can't put my family through knowing what was happening all those years. Edit. For all of you who mean well, this is something that's been with me my entire life. I didn't just move on and forget about it. I haven't had a single day where it didn't cross my mind or affect how I live my life. I know that it doesn't just affect me. What you need to realize is that I'm not just blocking it out and pretending it didn't happen. Nothing you're going to say hasn't occurred to me before. You need to realize that I've had years to think about this, and you really don't know better. I fight against this every day. I don't want it to dictate who I am anymore. I don't want it to still have power over me. I know I'm coming off as a cockbag, but it's like telling somebody you're depressed and having them tell you to smile and it'll get better. Your heart may be in the right place, but now, on top of constantly feeling ashamed, or treating me like I'm an idiot, too broken to function. I know my own situation. I didn't come here so somebody could fix it. Throwaway. Obviously, when my dad was arrested for domestic disturbance, he had actually attempted to kidnap me that night. He walked into my room and picked me up. I was 5-6, and asked if I wanted to go across the country with him. I excitedly said yes, of course. But then my mom came in with the phone and asked him to speak with the police who were on the line. He put me down and I never told anyone that it could send him to jail if people found out. And if my mom hadn't have walked in at that moment, my life would have been a lot different. A little while back I downloaded Tinder to try it out. About the 10th woman who came up was a friend's wife. Walked in on my best friend's wife, ducking her good friend David. These two were going at it like it was the last days of Rome. And by that, I mean I'm 90% sure he was ducking her in the ass, considering my best friend claims that they don't even pre-form oral on one another. I found that confusing. Frankly, have tried to broach the subject several times. He's cut me off each time. I'm pretty sure he knows. Maybe they have an arrangement. Maybe I'm next. I came into work one day and a female co-worker had been using my computer to Facebook chat. She had went home and accidentally left her Facebook up. So, seeing how it was my office and my computer, I read through some of the She had been sleeping with her boss for months and the conversations were very graphic. Oh yeah, boss is married. In one conversation he laughs about how female employee left 5 minutes before my wife came home. Now, boss and I are even as far as rank goes, but we rarely get along and haven't for years. I've always thought he was a douche and this confirmed it. This took place about 3 years ago. We've had several head-to-head arguments since then and I've always known I could absolutely ruin his it if I wanted to. But I've always taken the higher road. He has no idea I have that full conversation still on my computer. Kinda the opposite, I know about somebody who kept a secret that ruined somebody's life. I have a friend in Ireland who grew up without a father. Never knew who his dad was. Has had kind of a rough life. Figured his dad had knocked up his mom and run off on them. A few months ago, he told me that he finally found him. An old family friend who he considered an aunt knew where he was, because she was friends with the guy, and it wasn't very far. My friend and his dad were finally united, and it turns out that his dad had a family of his own. The guy was really sorry and had no idea he had knocked up some woman or that my friend existed at all. The aunt never told the dad because she figured he knew and just wanted nothing to do with them. She could have told that guy when my friend was still a baby, and then he would have had his dad around. It wasn't intentionally malicious, but this woman making assumptions and keeping secrets lead to a boy not knowing his father until he was in college. I was the other guy in an affair. Ended up getting her pregnant. She gave birth to her in December. The husband still does not know. I regret my stupid decisions and now have to live with my mistakes in the way that it brings. I made a name for myself, so to say, with the mothers of old classmates. I was a booty call for 6 mothers whose children I graduated high school with. My uncle molested me as a child. Even paid me a few bucks here and there for performing well. I never told anyone, because he was a dumb, young teenager, and I didn't want to ruin my family. Looks like the NSA is going with the old just ask method. I kept quiet the fact that my father was cheating on my mother for a while. I never mentioned it to anyone, not even my father. I just kept tabs on him. One day though, I slipped up, and now my parents have split. Divorce will be down the line. My neighbor and his wife are into bestiality. They have 2 male dogs and I'm pretty sure they make movies themselves. The guy once told me when he was drunk and he invited me to play with them, but no thanks. Edit. I'm not going to call the cops on him. I've known him long before he even had those 2 dogs and we play racquetball together. The dogs look healthy and well fed. So does the wife. My sister and I were abused by my mom's ex-fiance. Myself physically and her both physically and sexually. He broke her nose, gave her a black eye, and got her drunk and molested her. He would flip it over the smallest things. He strangled me and beat me once because his daughter slipped and fell and she blamed it on me pushing her. My sister was around 12. I was 13 or 14. My mother knew the whole time and didn't do a damn thing about it. Edit. My most common post is about being abused. Heart. Edit. You guys are amazing. Thanks for the positive feedback and the wishing the better for me. My brother has HIV and won't tell our parents or any other family. It wouldn't ruin their lives. but he's ruining his by going at this mostly alone. He's had to borrow quite a bit of money and everyone just thinks he's being irresponsible. One of my non-citizen friend married her cousin, who is a permanent resident, to be able to stay in the United States after her visa expired. Nobody knows of the marriage but 2 or 3 people. Apparently the background check is not as thorough as I thought, and it's in Alabama, so yeah, no. My best friend's son is not biologically his, it's his brother's. I know for a fact my mother cheated on my father, and who she did it with. However, I know that life is complicated and people don't live in a black and white world. Furthermore, I was young and don't know the full context of their relationship. As a child I was angry and mad, but as I've gotten older I've seen that life is about choices. Sometimes people make bad ones. Doesn't always make them a bad person. I'm not excusing the behavior, it just makes them a person. My parents are long since divorced for other reasons, but my dad is still madly in love with my mom. It would crush him and my younger sister if he ever found out. I'd rather my father continue to reminisce on the good times he and my mother had rather than tarnish everything because I need to tell someone. Edit words. I protected my ex-boyfriend from the police after they were called to our apartment. The neighbors called the cops after hearing my screams. I told the cops he didn't beat me even though it was blatantly obvious. But I didn't want to ruin his life by getting arrested. Looking back, I was very young and naive and I probably should have had him arrested to teach him a life lesson. So he maybe wouldn't put his hands on any of his future girlfriends. Edit, added X. Catherine has a crush on Matt. Me and my identical twin brother are both juniors at our uni. He's a really outgoing, social frat who's always the life of the party and basically drowning in poon. I on the other hand, find solace in the quieter things. A small, close group of friends, picnics at the park, low-key get-togethers at my girlfriend's house. Nothing large unlike my bro. Well, one night my bro had too much to drink and just started to go AWOL. He got into some fights, threw a TV through the window in his frat house, and got caught on camera sucking face with a guy. First off, lemme say that I don't have anything wrong with gay people. They're no different than heterosexuals. Me and my brother were both raised this way by our parents and he shares the same view. However, his socialite status would shatter if he was discovered to be the dreaded, earth-shattering, child molesting, dog kicking, homosexual that all of his in-crowd friends violently blindly hated. So I did what any loving brother would do. I told everyone that it was me, not him. My friends and girlfriend knew the truth and didn't really care honestly. However, my brother was amazed I would do something like that. Seeing his face light up like that made all the jokes and ridicule worth it. Twins from the womb to the tomb. Was physically and psychologically abused by my mother's boyfriend for years. She didn't know. At first, it ranged from pushing, punching and choking, to destroying the things my father would send me. He lived far away unfortunately, to get rises out of me to justify punishing me. Got into my mid-teens, 14-15, and was always angry at home. Arguments with her every day, constant shouting, and got pretty good at patching holes in walls, etc. Was certain I was going to end up drugged out of my mind or killing someone within months. Finally one day I let slip what he'd been doing in an extremely massive argument with my mother, and she didn't believe me. As a result of our intensifying arguments, he made the decision that I should live with him. Forced me to work for his company, construction, on weekends, occasionally after school, then would charge me rent, utilities, food and cost of living. So I never saw a dime, wasn't allowed to watch TV, couldn't use the phone, didn't have a computer, constantly cleaning. I began to loathe being at home more than I did the bullies at school. I was just barely a teen. Booty would find whatever excuse to stay at school longer, and dreaded the weekends, with no friends and no one to talk to. Things were bad. One Saturday, I refused to go to work for him. He got furious. I ran to the bedroom and barricaded the door with a dresser, small bookshelf and my cot of a bed. He broke the door in half, took me by the arms and threw me 6 feet into a wall. Then he got on his knees above me and began to choke me until I started losing vision. let go and said I had to fix this mess and he'd be back to pick me up for work in an hour, and proceeded to lock me outside, barefoot, with no coat, in the rain as he left. Like a bad ducking movie, I went downstairs to the tenant, banged on the door and asked to be let in. She refused because she was afraid he'd evict her. I told her she heard the noise, her living room is under the bedroom I had, and she didn't call 911, so she could either get out of my way or she'd be the same as him. She moves. I break down the door to get upstairs, break his door to get into his room, and pick up the phone. I called my father, a police officer living 3,000 kilometers away, and told him, in tears, what happened. He told me not to worry, he'll fix things. 15 minutes later, a big deal. Since everything was 30 minutes away, a local PD officer shows up, picks me up, and brings me to his place. I'm leaving in 2 days to move in with my dad. The cop was a friend of my father's, and was acting upon his wishes. My mother had custody, but my father called and said what was what. She has no choice. I'm gone. I moved in with him less than a week later. 2 days on planes, 1 day layover, and the second he hugged him, all the anger was gone. So much weight, gone. Things have been good since, but I'll always remember the 3 years I lived with my dad as the best. My father essentially kept a secret that could ruin multiple lives, and his career, before he retired, so that I could live with him. He continued to pay my mother child support, couldn't get out to go to court 3,000 kilometers away, continued to put up with her so that I could be safe. My mother still doesn't believe me, almost 10 years after leaving. It's a long post. I'm sorry, but I don't think I've ever said my whole story to before, and even now, it still feels like a weight being lifted just typing it. I'm not sure if this experience has broken me, but during those days I stopped crying. The last time I cried was at the funeral of my later friend a year ago, and it had been years before that. I'm not sure if I just suppress it now, or if I just don't feel. But even after the happy ending, this title will always be there. You remind me of what happened. Edit. Funny realization I just had actually. His construction company had some pretty big contracts at the time, like renovating a large chain of gas stations as they changed their brand. But the main work he would have me do was on a massive, very expensive, easily $600K house. They moved into that house together about 6 months after I left. I guess the funny part, to me, is how I built the damn place, but never lived there. That, and I had 2 pairs of jeans ready to fall apart, and shirts with holes all over the place, but they couldn't afford to buy me new clothing, not even with all that child support. It was a lot. Child support. A few years ago a family friend hung himself. Everyone thinks it was because his wife was sleeping around, but turns out he was having sexual thoughts about his older stepdaughter and he couldn't live with the guilt. My friend's dad is gay. I have this friend, let's call him Bryce, is gay and was 16 at the time. He has Grindr, and on it he found my friend Corey's dad on it. Corey's dad started flirting with Bryce and telling him that his age didn't matter. Corey's dad is in his late 40s or early 50s, I believe, and asking where they could hook up. As soon as he found out which school Bryce went to, he stopped talking to him and blocked him on the app. Bryce decided it was best to not tell Corey. Corey's dad has 3 kids and is married, and every time I see his dad I feel really bad for him and slightly uncomfortable. TLDR. Friend's married dad is gay and flirts with teen boys on Grindr. My grandfather molested me when I was very young. Either my family has no idea, or they do and think I was too young to remember and didn't want to traumatize me. Either way, he's dead now, so I don't see a point in bringing it up. I've put it behind me now, but as a teen young adult when I realized what he'd done, I was very angry and it took a lot to just let it go. I didn't want to ruin his life or put my family through that, because I love them, and him, regardless. When I was a senior in high school, I started dating a guy a year younger than me. Right before we split he confessed that his dad and my mother had an affair. WTF. I didn't believe it until I confronted her one day and she admitted it. She obviously begged me not to tell my father, which 14 years later I still haven't. But I was a D and used it as blackmail every chance I got. My mum's having an affair with the guy who lives in the same house as my stepdad, current spouse, and his 2 daughters. Did I mention the guy was my dad? Edit. I am not terrible at telling stories. It makes me very uncomfortable to elaborate, as I found out by walking in and it kinda ducked me up. Understandably, a few people cracked it in the comments, so check there. I found sugar in my older sister's room. She had recently moved back into the parents' house with us and had been going through some emotional problems. I did not know what it was at the time, but something in my 15-year-old brain told me it wasn't good. I even tasted a tiny bit of it. No effects. Anyway, I kept it to myself. A few years later, I am in college and my sister has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and is in jail for stabbing another girl while they were both on heroin. Rehab, prison, felony, lifelong addiction, not in that order, a whole 9 yards. So this is a secret I kept that actually may have ruined a couple lives because I kept it. I sometimes wonder what would have been different if I had gone to my parents with the drugs I had found. Maybe issues my sis was having could have been caught earlier. Lesson here is that sometimes it is best not to keep a secret. Yes, in the short term I saved my sister some grief from my parents. But long term, who knows? It got ducked up. Throwaway for this one. I used to work in a chain hotel in the burbs of a Midwestern city while I was in high school. It was a pretty easy job, but there happened to be a government-owned ammunition plant down the road that was going through a privatization process. The company that was buying the plant had a lot of their execs stay at our hotel during the process. Well, one day a guy in a suit comes down late in the evening and asks me if I can fax some documents for him. Late 90s alert. Fax machines in use. I ask him if he wants to wait for the confirmation and he says no thanks and just leaves. Well, I go back in the office and start loading the documents into the fax machine and start browsing through, and holy it, all the pages I'm sending are reviewing all the malfeasance, gross negligence and environmental disasters that had been covered up at this manufacturing plant. Crazy it was going on, like just dumping chemicals into the watershed that fed into the nearby town. Chemical storage ponds whose dams would break, and on and on and on. I could have totally ducked up a lot of people's day by making a copy of that and dropping it off at the local newspaper. But I was a ducking coward and just dropped that in the trash bin and went on with my day.